the silent forest. In the quiet town of Ravenswood, there was a forest known to the locals as the Silent Forest. The name came from the eerie silence that blanketed the area. No birds sang, no leaves rustled, and even the wind seemed to avoid it. Legend had it that anyone who entered the forest alone never returned the same, if they returned at all. Megan, a college student studying local folklore, decided to investigate the forest for her thesis. Armed with a camera and a notepad, she ventured into the woods, determined to uncover the truth. As she walked deeper, the silence grew heavier, pressing against her ears like a tangible force. After an hour of walking, she stumbled upon an old, dilapidated cabin. Its windows were boarded up, and the door hung ajar. Curiosity piqued, Megan stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the floorboards creaked under her weight. On the walls were faded photographs of a family, a mother, father, and 2 children. One photo, however, stood out. It was a picture of the family standing in front of the cabin, but their faces were scratched out. Suddenly, Megan felt a chill run down her spine. She turned to see a shadow dart past the doorway. Heart pounding, she hurried outside, only to find herself surrounded by darkness. The sun had disappeared behind thick clouds, and the forest seemed to close in on her. As she tried to find her way back, she heard whispers. They were faint at first, then grew louder, echoing through the trees. "Leave," they seemed to say. Megan's pulse quickened, and she broke into a run. The whispers grew more insistent, merging into a cacophony of voices. She stumbled and fell, scraping her hands on the rough ground. When she looked up, she saw them. Figures standing in the shadows, their faces obscured. They were the family from the photographs, their eyes hollow and lifeless. Panic surged through Megan as she scrambled to her feet. She ran blindly through the forest, the whispers chasing her. Finally, she burst out of the forest and collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. The whispers ceased, and the oppressive silence lifted. Megan looked back at the forest, its edge now a mere line of trees against the horizon. She knew she had encountered something far beyond her understanding. Months later, Megan's thesis was completed, but she never spoke of what truly happened in the silent forest. The experience haunted her dreams, and the whispers never truly left her. The townspeople noticed a change in her. She was quieter, more withdrawn, as if part of her had never left the forest. The forgotten playground. On the outskirts of Millfield, there lay an abandoned playground. It had once been a vibrant place filled with the laughter of children, but now it stood as a desolate relic of the past. The swings creaked in the wind, and the merry-go-round was rusted and overgrown with weeds. Tom, a local journalist, had heard rumors of strange occurrences at the playground and decided to investigate. Armed with his camera and a flashlight, he arrived just as the sun was setting. The playground looked eerie in the twilight, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. As Tom walked through the playground, he felt a sudden drop in temperature. He shivered and pulled his jacket tighter around him. He reached the old slide and noticed something strange. Small handprints on the metal, as if children had been playing there recently. But the playground had been abandoned for years. Tom took out his camera and began snapping pictures. As he reviewed the photos, he noticed something chilling. In one of the images, there was a blurry figure standing next to the swings. It was a child, but its face was indistinguishable. Tom felt a wave of unease wash over him. Determined to uncover the truth, he ventured further into the playground. Near the merry-go-round, he found an old, weathered teddy bear. It looked out of place, as if someone had left it there recently. As he picked it up, he heard a giggle. The sound was faint, but it sent chills down his spine. Tom swung his flashlight around, but saw nothing. The giggle came again, this time closer. He felt a cold breath on the back of his neck and spun around, but there was no one there. Panic began to set in. He decided to leave, but as he turned to go, he saw them, children, ghostly figures emerging from the shadows. Their eyes were empty, and their smiles were unnerving. The children began to move toward him, their giggles turning into eerie laughter. Tom backed away, his heart pounding. He turned and ran, the laughter echoing behind him. He didn't stop until he was back at his car, gasping for breath. When Tom developed the photos later, he saw the children in every picture. They were always there, lurking in the background, watching him. The experience left him shaken, and he never returned to the playground. The stories he wrote never fully captured the terror he felt that night, and he often found himself staring at the photos, wondering what those children wanted. The lighthouse keeper. In the small coastal town of Black Rock, there stood an old lighthouse that had been out of operation for decades. The locals believed it to be haunted, and few dared to go near it after dark. The lighthouse keeper, Mr. Whitmore, had vanished without a trace years ago, and his disappearance only fueled the rumors. Alice, a young historian, decided to document the history of the lighthouse for her book. She obtained permission to explore it and arrived one foggy afternoon. The lighthouse loomed above her, its once bright paint now peeling and weathered. She stepped inside, and the heavy door creaked ominously behind her. The interior was damp and cold. Alice shivered as she climbed the spiral staircase, her footsteps echoing through the hollow structure. She reached the top and found the old keeper's quarters. It was as if time had stood still. Mr. Whitmore's belongings were still there, covered in a thick layer of dust. As she sifted through the papers on the desk, she found the keeper's journal. The last entry was dated the night he disappeared. It spoke of strange lights at sea and a feeling of being watched. Alice felt a shiver run down her spine. She looked out the window and saw nothing but the dense fog. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned quickly, but no one was there. The air grew colder, and she could see her breath. The footsteps continued, slowly ascending the staircase. Alice's heart raced as she backed away from the door. The footsteps stopped just outside the room. Holding her breath, Alice listened. There was a soft knock on the door, then silence. Summoning her courage, she opened the door, but the staircase was empty. She felt a presence, something watching her from the shadows. The temperature dropped further, and she saw a faint glow at the base of the stairs. Alice descended cautiously. The glow intensified, revealing an old lantern hanging from the ceiling, swaying gently as if moved by an unseen hand. She heard a whisper, "Help me." It was faint, but desperate. The lantern's light flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Alice followed the light to the basement, a place she had not planned to explore. The air was thick with the scent of salt and decay. At the far end of the room, she saw a figure hunched over. It was Mr. Whitmore, or what was left of him. His ghostly form was transparent, and his eyes were filled with sorrow. "Help me," he repeated. Alice felt a wave of sadness wash over her. She realized that the keeper had been trapped, unable to move on. She promised to tell his story, to let the world know what had happened. As she left the lighthouse, the fog began to lift. The oppressive atmosphere lightened, and Alice felt a sense of peace. She knew she had done the right thing. The lighthouse was still a place of mystery, but the spirit of Mr. Whitmore was finally at rest. The shadow in the library. The Old Town Library of Ashgrove was a grand building, with towering shelves and ornate woodwork. It had stood for over a century, a beacon of knowledge and history. But beneath its polished surface, there were dark secrets that few knew about. Ethan, a young librarian, had heard whispers of strange occurrences in the library's basement. Determined to uncover the truth, he decided to investigate after hours. As the last patrons left and the doors were locked, Ethan descended into the basement, flashlight in hand. The basement was a labyrinth of old books and forgotten artifacts. The air was musty, and the only sound was the soft hum of the building's heating system. Ethan felt a chill as he moved deeper into the basement. He had always felt uneasy down here, as if something was watching him. As he turned a corner, his flashlight flickered. The beam of light landed on an old wooden door he had never noticed before. It was slightly ajar, and a faint light shone from within. Ethan pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was small, filled with old books and dusty furniture. In the center was a large, ornate mirror. Ethan felt drawn to the mirror. As he approached, he noticed his reflection seemed different, darker, more sinister. He reached out to touch the glass, and a cold hand grabbed his wrist. He gasped and tried to pull away, but the grip tightened. From the shadows of the mirror, a figure emerged. It was Ethan, but not. Its eyes were hollow, and its smile was twisted. "Welcome," it whispered. "I've been waiting for you." Ethan felt his heart race as he struggled to break free. The shadowy figure stepped through the mirror, its form becoming more solid. "You've freed me," it said, its voice a chilling echo of Ethan's own. Panic surged through Ethan as he wrenched his hand free and stumbled backward. The shadow advanced, its eyes locked on him. "You can't leave," it hissed. "Not now." Desperate, Ethan looked around for anything he could use as a weapon. He grabbed a heavy book and swung it at the shadow. It passed through the figure, scattering like smoke, only to reform moments later. Ethan's mind raced. He remembered the stories of the library's haunted past, of a librarian who had vanished years ago. This must be his spirit trapped in the mirror. Summoning all his courage, Ethan lunged for the mirror and smashed it with the book. The mirror shattered, and the shadow let out a wail that echoed through the basement. As the pieces of glass fell to the floor, the shadow dissolved into the air, leaving nothing but silence behind. Ethan stood there, breathless and shaken. He knew he had uncovered one of the library's darkest secrets, and he hoped that breaking the mirror had freed the trapped spirit. He never spoke of what happened that night, but he felt a change in the library's atmosphere. The basement no longer felt as oppressive, and the whispers ceased. The old library of Ashgrove continued to stand, a place of knowledge and mystery. But Ethan knew that some secrets were best left forgotten, buried in the shadows of the past.